I found you based on you hacking into a site and then changing some stuff, and so it piqued my interest. I checked into your art. I liked it, and so then let's have you now you go introduce yourself a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about like you getting started in the art world.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So just so you know, I haven't prepared anything, right? So there
Good.
might be some moments where I'm looking for stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm a 28-year-old French guy giving too much information away. Joking. Um, so I've been doing digital art for like 10 years at least, starting on DeviantArt. I saw you had Justin Mahler. I think he's working there as a CCO or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, so I was actually looking up to Justin and other artists when I started. Lots of inspiration, and I just created some stuff, had my run, learned a lot of stuff, and then at some point I felt like I had not, I had lost. How could I say, not interest, but I couldn't find a proper way to say what I wanted to say with art. So I started learning coding, and I had engineering school at the same time. So I was getting more into technical stuff. Um, so life continues, and at some point last year, I think around, I mean, this was because of the COVID situation, right? I was put in what we call chômage partiel in France. So it's basically you're at home, not working. Um, and so I ended up looking back at what I liked to do when I didn't work. So that was art, and I tried to mix it with what I learned and what I also like to do, which is coding. And I learned hacking also a bit at this time. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a hacker because I like to hack stuff, but it's not like, I mean, no one has a proper academic record of being a hacker, obviously. But it's something I feel like there's no one who tells you at some point, okay, now you're a hacker. It's official,
Mhm.
right? I mean, people on Twitter have been saying this. I think I'm just hacking stuff, and I'm doing it just because I think it's cool. Like I'm not trying to somehow start a revolution or something, but I'm trying to create stuff that I want to exist. It's gonna sound um, it's gonna sound like what every artist says, but I mean, at some point, that's also why we do it, right? Um, and that I wanted to see something like this, like the foundation piece I released earlier this month. It was just something like I was looking at Banksy and thinking, well, digital graffiti, it exists, by the way, but it's used more in a political way, like people hacking stuff and then I don't know, saying like Trump is a bad president or something. That exists, but never for art. So I thought this is missing in the NFT space, so I did it. And so I'm just looking for stuff and having ideas, and whenever I think it's cool, and it doesn't necessarily have to be unique, or like I'm not trying to invent stuff.
Mm.
I see myself as an innovator. I'm trying to not sound too cocky here, but just to explain, an inventor, he actually invents something, right? He's the first to create a technique or use a technique. The innovator is more, he's not the first doing it, but he's finding a proper or a meaningful way to use this technique, right? So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it comes across as arrogant, right? I mean, I think that's something that, in terms of like a mastery standpoint, I continue to use comparisons into like the sport world and stuff like that. But, like because that's more of like my own background, but to use a tool or to play a game a little bit differently but to figure out a better way to do it, right? Like Steph Curry is like a big player and he revolutionized basketball. with
Mhm.
just high accuracy from the 3-point line, and mathematically it makes a lot more sense. And so then, it's one of those things where like you doing subtle changes, like you might not have made, the hoop and the basketball, but you can still take
Mhm.
it to another level. And I think that's something to, seek. So I don't think it comes across as arrogant. I think it's a worthy goal.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's just looking at the same stuff from another angle that might not be revolutionary or but it's still new, and I think that that's what counts.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For for you with like the love of art and coding, do you find like a lot of like similarities there, or is it like two distinct hobbies?
Between coding and art,
Hmm.
um, Jesus, that's a very good question. um, yeah, I mean, for sure, both. I mean, okay, some people are going to argue also, and we could go into the discussion between what's the difference between design and art. Um, okay, let's assume that design is part of art, right? Because otherwise we're gonna get stuck here. Um, so I think that design and coding are related in the fact and related to every other discipline probably, in the sense that you can constantly improve um, step by step, right? You don't need to start and straight away be Basquiat or uh, whichever big name in art. And it's the same for hacking, right? You don't need to code like, okay, you're not going to know these names probably, but um, whatever, right? You can incrementally learn stuff, and you have to be patient. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, which isn't that much when you compare it to other people who have been doing digital art, for example, since the 1990s, right? That there are those people, and actually they're present in the NFT space. That's impressive, and they just have a skill set that grows constantly, and I think that that plays into better art, right? It's related to design in the first place, but I think design is the tool, and if you have a good skill set in design, which is basically you know how to arrange stuff to create something that has a certain effect on someone, um, you are able to use this in order to create better art. Does that make sense?
Yeah. While you're saying that, I'm almost imagining. So I have a slight couple years background of digital advertising, and there's a pathway to purchase. Now, from what you're saying, right? If a UX designer, right, designs or changes the or UI, sorry, a UI designer, right, changes the design of a site to better not manipulate, but push somebody to purchase. Do you think that
Mhm.
that counts as art?
Um, okay, that's a good question. It counts as craft for
Hmm.
sure, in the sense that it's more than just doing the regular stuff. It's a certain level of skill you have attained.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say, and it wasn't your question, but I think I'd say it is some kind of hacking, and that relates to what Pac was tweeting some time ago, which is that design is hack, uh, in a sense that you're trying to make someone do something um, in the most easy way. And I think that's why I like UI and UX so much, because it's it's not about just putting a button on a website.
Hmm.
It's actually thinking about what the people is going to think while they see the button. Will they click it? Will they click something else? Like what's going to happen, right? And if you don't think about what's going to happen, then what are you doing here, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that that's what you took. Not that I disagree. I realize that I took it the wrong way, but that's what Pac's statement meant. Because when I read design is hack, I took it as design is bullshit. And like,
Oh, I mean, could be, right? We don't know. He's pretty enigmatic.
yeah,
So,
I just thought I took it as like legitimately that like yeah, design is bunk, right? Like just design is nothing, or you know what I mean, like a little bit more of like a negative connotation to design, and not that design is, almost hacking people or something to that extent. And that's really interesting. I'm probably wrong. You're probably right now that I've thought about it a little bit more, but reading it, yeah, I don't know. I felt it was like more tongue in cheek at first, and now I'm realizing, or it's dawning on me, that I was probably actually in the wrong. I guess. Hmm. Interesting. I So for you, in terms of like art and getting started with like coding, do you prefer one versus the other, or is both of them kind of like pursuits that you like to get after in terms of improvement and self-expression?
That's a good question. I've been asking myself my whole life up until last year, basically. So I actually struggled in the decision between pursuing an art school or an engineering school, and that felt like an awkward situation. But now that I look back at it, it makes a lot of sense because it's both things are just they're not the same thing, but they have the same roots, right? It's about creating, arranging stuff, and at the end you have a product or an art piece. It doesn't really matter that contains something and that is supposed to do something, right? It's not like if you compare it to um, being a doctor, where it's a really completely different stuff. I think both things are related, and so I wouldn't choose between the two. I would just say both are just tools to create stuff.
Yeah. I For me, I mean, I think that, like the ability to hack and change and do that kind of stuff gives like a unique expression to your art. But in terms of your actual art, like how would you describe it?
Um, you mean in terms of what I'm trying to do,
I guess
or
the description of it stylistically, and yeah, I guess what, thoughts or emotions are you trying to provoke through it?
um, my first reaction would be all over the place, right? That's how I would describe it. Because up until now, and a lot of people would argue that to be successful, you need a distinctive style, right? And that's a reasonable assumption, and it might be true. I have no idea, but I'm not able to stick to one style, right, and just do the same stuff every time. I need the content to adapt to. Sorry, no, I need the form to adapt to the content. Does that make sense? Right? I'm not able to. Um, if I want to critique something related to a news article, I'm not going to just draw with a pencil on a paper because I feel I feel it's out of place. It doesn't, right? There's no relationship between the two. So that's why I'm a bit all over the place. It's because I always try to adapt what I do with what I want to say. It doesn't matter that it doesn't mean that every art piece has to have a deep meaning. I think it's about the global, like if you take a macro view, your whole what you have created, like all of the art pieces together need to have some kind of cohesion. I would agree on that. But this cohesion basically stems from yourself, right? Because you're the common thing between all of those.
Yeah. I I mean, I think that at a minimum, stylistically, the pieces all look different, but they're all very thought-provoking, right? Like they all kind of have a something like turns on inside of you in terms of like getting the gears going in terms of, like the statement of the title or the actual artwork within it, where you're just kind of like, what is this, or how is this, or, like, what does he mean by this kind of thing, where like some pieces, and I don't mean this in like an insult or anything, are just pure art, right? Like, or it feels more
Yeah.
pure art where you look at it and you go, that looks really, really nice. Or like it clicks, like it hits something. For
Yeah.
yours, it feels more brain than pure emotion, if it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I did create an art piece that was called "Do you buy design or art?" That's basically the question, right? And I myself, I if you look at my collection, I mean, it's not that big, right? But I have bought some pieces, and actually, a lot of them are just design, and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't think you have to be, uh, you need to be an artist, or you need to create something that's called art. Design is fine.
Mm.
Both are good things. Both can be NFTs. I think there's just a difference, and yeah, if it's true that I always try to, I love design, but I always try to, if I have a something beautiful or a technique I would like to use, I will always try to find the best um, communication that goes with it. I'll not just like for the last piece I did with a bit of a clickbaity title for the IPFS file. I had this technique of that I had seen from Ange Albertini, which you can find on my Twitter. I add his account,
Mm.
where you can basically create what he calls polyglot files. So you could have a video that can be opened as a PDF. So you end up with two different files which are the same. I'm not going to go into detail, um, but you can basically it's just a nifty technique to do something cool. So I could have just did a funny picture, put some sound on it, and just thrown it out as an NFT. But I just kept it in my pocket and tried to find, like, I just put it on some notes, and until I find something that fits, I'm not going to use it. So sometimes I end up seeing my idea used by someone else, and I'm like, shit. But that's the deal, right? And also, someone taught me that being the first doesn't mean much. So first, no one's gonna remember, um, and at the end of the day, you're the only one who cares, right? The guy who did it first is the only one who cares. It's not the point. I think the point is doing something you want to remember, right? So that piece, when I asked Callan if she wanted to collaborate, and Mike Saint Jean, um, there, so I just basically told them, okay, that's the project. That's what I would like the message to be. Um, what do you guys think? And so they created and sent me what they had done, and it just fit perfectly with the message. So that's how it was crafted. And actually, at the beginning, I wanted to be an image file that could be opened as a sound file that could be opened as a PDF. But first, there's technical restrictions, and even beyond that, it made a lot more sense to have Callan's art piece separated, hidden between both mine and Mike's, just because that's how it happens in reality, right? The victims are usually not the first people who are hurt. So I wanted to reflect that. And obviously, in my tweet, that's not the first thing you see.
Mm.
So if you just look at the tweet, you just see the hack, blah, blah, blah. And you don't, you could look at the tweet, look at the art piece, and not even realize, without being cocky, but not realize what's behind it. Um, so um, I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but just that's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is what it is, right? As like non-vocally sounding important as that sounded terrible coming out of my mouth, but like sometimes it just is. And I think that you bring up like a really important point about being first to market is not necessarily important, where I think we're starting to see a larger rush from institutions and, conglomerates trying to be the first to market with things. And I think that just because you're the first, whatever, anything, it's not really being first, it's how you come into the market and what you bring into the market more than anything.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to feel the rush and like the stampede, and at the same time trying to like hold people back from the edge, because I think that that will just be I don't think people will forget if you come into the space first and it was terrible.
Yeah. Um, I mean, you're right. It doesn't mean shit, to be honest. Like,
Mm,
Bitcoin wasn't the first digital money I know of, at least.
mm,
Probably the first blockchain implementation, but not the first digital money, right? Um, Ethereum wasn't the first blockchain currency, but it might be. And maybe I shouldn't say that because a lot of people are going to be upset, but it might be one of the most important,
mm.
if not the most implementations, I meant, from the blockchain. And so being the first doesn't mean shit. Actually, it's 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 about being the first who does it right. And even that, I mean, at the end of the day, if people like what you do, if you do cool stuff, whether you're last or first doesn't mean much. And you can't even blame superstars right now getting into the NFT space and releasing stuff and seeing they have huge success, because it's not like they've built their success in a day, right? You can't forget about the work they've done to get there, building an audience, etc. So no, I think we're starting to get angry, like angry old people in the NFT space. And I'm not even an OG, right? I'm just from last year, but it feels like years in crypto years.
Yeah, I think it's something that I have a buddy who I had on that I have to actually drop the podcast. You're now the third one that will be in the pipeline to start getting released. And my buddy Jason, like he and I was discussing with a couple of guys who are lawyers, and I think a year is basically like an OG at this point. Like I think that there's the inflection point, right? Like there's the point at which like everything popped off and this like really hit mainstream, and then beforehand. And I think
Mhm.
everything beforehand of like, I don't know, February or January, maybe it's just 2021, right? Like maybe it's just January 1st, 2021, where if you were in the space before that time frame, that almost feels like OG. Because like I know from like the Nifty Discord, like the Nifty Discord went from like 500 people, maybe 1,000, to like 16,000 people. And
Yeah,
that's wild, you know? So I think a year probably qualifies you for like an OG in the space.
yeah, you do make a good point. Like, it's the taking regular human years as a reference is probably not the way we function.
Mhm.
We probably use like big inflection points, and it might not even be the biggest we've seen yet, but also it might go the other way. Let's see. But I think in the long run, it's gonna go mainstream, and that's probably the most important.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I'm happy to see, artists getting paid and stuff. I guess to that point though, like I don't want to be like a pessimist, but like I feel like every bubble has a pop, right? And not that this is a bubble, but every explosive growth returns back to at least like some kind of normalcy, right? And I don't think NFTs are going anywhere. I think that, once you have Call of Duty NFTs, Fortnite NFTs, right? Like in-game currency also, right? Like not just like a piece of artwork, but like
Mhm.
actual selling of skins similar to like Counter-Strike. All of that kind of aspect, that's when NFTs have like really branched into like everything, right? Or I mean, people have talked about using NFTs to shard pieces of ownership for their house and then like take loans against it, which is also really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess if it can really revolutionize everything to that extent, then maybe that's a whole nother conversation that I'm not technologically prepared for conversating. But I guess where in the development of NFTs do you think that we are, to summarize?
We're I think we are at the point where everyone realizes it's it's going to be a big thing. But we also start to realize the issues with how we've been doing stuff up until now, right? Talking about IPFS, etc. And I think there's a lot of confusion. There's not many people who actually understand how contracts work, what NFTs really are, and that's we need time, right? It's not going to happen in a day. But for example, today The Verge has released an article where the the headline is pretty clickbaity, right? Saying something like your NFTs might not be worth anything in 10 years just because the file won't exist anymore, right? But that just stems from a miscommunication, I would say, or like they don't. I mean, they corrected it in the article, but people don't really understand what an NFT is. So this will change. We'll eventually get to a point where everyone knows what they're buying and how to take care of it, which is not that difficult. And use cases will get discovered. We're just at the beginning. Games are going to be huge. Come on, like, can you imagine League of Legends skins being NFTs or something? They would just explode. Like if you have a one-on-one skin, like the price would be insane. It's just it enables you to sell stuff that you couldn't sell before. So that's why people are talking about the bubble, because they see prices that are huge. But I mean, if you were able to buy 1,000th of Star Wars 4, right? What would be the price of it? It would be huge. But you could do the same with a lot of other very famous movies. You can't just assume that these would be $10. You know, it's just because the movie is huge. And so we'll get there. But it's very interesting in any case. Yeah.
So you mentioned something that I find really interesting, and I'm looking to possibly hire somebody to do clips, and so this would be a great clip for you. But do you want to try and give a stab at explaining NFTs?
Oh Jesus. That's a big responsibility you're giving me
Be
here.
the change you want to see in the
Uh,
world, right? In terms of educating.
so I'm not sure I'm the best educator, but I can try. I mean, when you buy an NFT, you buy a token. Okay, that's the first step. This token has something what we call token URI, which is basically the data that is contained inside the token. It just so happens that Ethereum is very non-efficient, I would say, and sending tokens with a lot of data in it would be too expensive, and I think there might even be technical implications, hurdles, I would say. So you end up only being able to put like 24 times 24 pictures, like CryptoPunks, or what other, like text and IDs for the tokens, etc., or URLs which host the image, for example. So that's what actually some people did. I think that's what Nifty does. And that's what IPFS does to some extent, just instead of looking for a place to look at, right? You're not looking at the address. It's like looking for a house, right? Instead of saying it's 24B Baker Street, or is it 21st B Baker Street? I can't remember. You're just gonna say, so that would be URL, right? You're giving the address. You could say, look for the house with the blue windows and the red door. That's what IPFS does. You just, the IPFS link is a way to compare the image with the hash, and a way to prove basically that the image you say is the token really is, right? So for example, if I have a token that is supposed to be the Mona Lisa, you should be able to grab the Mona Lisa image I'm giving you, compare it to the hash, and if it matches, then it really is this, right? It's not hosting the file. This is what nodes do from IPFS, but this is going too technical. But the IPFS hash is basically just a way to make sure that the image you say is the art piece really is. So it's then on you to host the image somewhere, or you rely on IPFS network, which is just a decentralized way of having the image. But decentralization still needs computers, right? It's the same for Ethereum. I don't understand also why a lot of people get upset about this, but Ethereum itself, right? If all the computers shut down, there's no Ethereum anymore, right? You still need a platform. It's like saying if the library burns down, obviously the books are not there anymore. This will always be the case just because that's how humans work. They create stuff. So if the stuff doesn't exist anymore, then it's not going to be there anymore. You can't create information from nothing. It has to be written somewhere.
Do you think, as far as a solution to that or a way around that, like longer term, would be that phone computing power goes up, and so instead of having server bays and mining rigs and stuff to that, you have like that staking system, and then phones being able to do that at a later date of possibly having you know an iPhone that matches a desktop. Let's just say hypothetically that's possible in 10, 20 years.
Mhm. I don't know if that's the question, but if it was, then yes, you could have like in the future some kind of universal IPFS, right? Where every phone hosts all this data, and then you could assume, yeah, okay, it's going to be persistent unless humanity as we know it goes down. If we do reach this point, then yeah, it's not going to be. I don't see a way to do it better,
Hmm.
probably, right? This would be the ultimate way to do it, and you can't you can't do it without IPFS or without the way IPFS works.
Gotcha. I think some of that went over my head. Hopefully that was a good enough education for people that are not quite as layman as me. I think that I kept up a little bit, given that I gave a decent question as a follow up. But I mean, always trying to learn more. And yeah,
Sure.
I have a buddy who's been trying to take me through the reins and ins and outs of cryptocurrency since like 2016. And so I think that I'm not quite as noobish as a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, still some of that definitely went over my head. So hopefully I can. I'm gonna try and find a link to also add into like the show notes for that in
Mhm.
terms of people where maybe they can kind of have it broken down in terms of like imagery and stuff, but I appreciate it. To kind of pivot a little bit back towards you and your art, do you want to talk a little bit about the YP 11.31?
Yeah, sure. Just before we do,
Mm-hmm.
just a small disclaimer. Obviously, I'm not an educator,
Mm-hmm.
and what we always say in the crypto space, do your own research, right?
Yeah,
Um, please do, just to understand everything. And before you invest or before you yourself create, try to understand which canvas you're using, right? I think that's important.
yeah.
Um, so okay, YP 1131. Um, First for the title, it's the okay. I'm not a scientific expert, right? But I think the way to say it in English is it is the sex determining gene. So it's the gene that is going to determine if you're male or female. And I decided to name this art piece this way because obviously being female nowadays sadly highly increases your chances of having to live with domestic violence, for example. So I wanted to highlight that in a non-obvious way, right? That's what I tried to do with other art pieces. Like I want you to be able to enjoy it without having to think too much. That's the design part. And but if you want, you can dig deeper and say, oh, okay, that's what it means, and that's why it's named this way. Um, so the idea was to highlight domestic violence and femicide in a broader way. Like I didn't want to be too specific. And also that's why I took the liberty to add Callan inside the collaboration, because it didn't make any sense as a guy, obviously hearing my voice, to talk about things I will never be able to live. So that's why we try to find a way to have mine and Mike's work be like have a meaningful way of existing next to Callan's. I don't know if that makes sense. And that ties back to the video hiding, quote unquote, the PDF.
Mm. Yeah. I guess on the topic of that piece, how do you make a choice of what you want to work on? Like, is it just something that you see and it invokes a response? And then, I guess similarly, I don't have that background either. But in terms of like the biology or whatever chemical biochem aspect of that YP11, right? Why or how do you get to that point in terms of like nomenclature for the piece?
Oh, Jesus. No, but it's good to, right? If you ask a question and I know the answer straight away, it's less interesting, I think, for the both of us. If I have to think about it, then we're probably getting to something interesting. Um, I would say, as everyone, I have like, I watch videos, I read newspapers, I was in engineering school, so I have some love for science, obviously. So I just, whenever I see something I find interesting, a technique, or um, for example, I see something about genes determining, like it felt, for example, for this example, if we want to be specific, it felt so crazy that such a tiny thing can determine how someone is going to live his or her own life, right? Um, and how you don't have any control on this. It felt uh, so crazy, and I feel like, and I felt like it wasn't. Um, I mean, it's probably something that someone said at some point, right? But it needed more people saying it, right? That this is just a gene, and obviously we're all the same, despite all the physical differences, right? But at the core, we're all the same. So it's just one gene changing the way you're constructed. So I felt like this needed highlighting, and I wanted to put it into in opposition with um, the big consequences. So basically, when you look at the piece, you have the title, which is the start, and then you go through the layers of the piece, and you get to the final consequence, right? So I don't want to get into Callan's writing too much, because it's not my place. But if you've read it, you probably know what I mean. Um, so I think it was it was the right way to do it, and I think I almost always proceed like that. Like it just stems from one idea, I write it down, and at some point it gets linked to something else, and it makes sense. But something I've learned, actually, I think I've learned it from Justin Mahler. Very funny.
Mhm.
When I was starting digital art, there was a magazine that was called Adobe Photoshop. Sorry for the the advertisement. You
It's
can
all good.
beep that out. Um, it doesn't exist anymore anyway. I mean, the software does, but not the magazine.
Mhm.
And no, sorry, it was Advanced. That's what it was called. Anyway, and in it there was an article about Justin, and I think he said, and sorry if it's someone else like Chuck Anderson or something, I think it was Justin, saying that sometimes you've been working on something for days, right? And at the end, you look at it and it just doesn't make sense, right? You've tried to force every piece to fit together, but it doesn't make sense. And you have to have the courage to erase and throw it away, um, even if you've been working on it for a lot of time. Just because if it doesn't make sense, then it shouldn't be in there. So, and I've lost my track right now. I can't remember why I'm talking about this, but oh yeah. So I write down ideas and techniques. I try to link them, and I try to find a meaningful way to use them until I do, and I just keep scrapping them if it doesn't. And at some point, I find something that makes a lot of sense, and then it's all about execution.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry for the uh, that was not a wall of text but a wall of speaking.
no, you're
Sorry.
good. I mean, that's the strength of long form podcasts, right? Is like to explain your creative process, as Cybercode Twins put into the text chat. I assume that you know them because they had interacted on Twitter with the post that I tagged you in.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear people's creative process. I also think that, a lot of what you're saying is like similar to like the sunken cost fallacy, where just because you've worked on something for a strong or a long period of time doesn't, and went in with like a strong sense of hope for great success behind it, doesn't mean that you shouldn't cast it aside. I doubt Justin Maller meant it in terms of like deleting the file, but at the same time, maybe you scrap it and put it on the side for a little bit. And it's one of those things I feel where I hear from a lot of artists where they're like, oh, I really wish I could go back to some of my old pieces and, put my new skills and new design take and redo it. And then,
Mhm.
therefore, like if you put in 10 hours to a piece, it goes on the sideline a year, two, 10 down the line. You have, a brain, I don't know, brain
Yeah.
blast moment. For some reason, Jimmy Neutron, the cartoon, just popped in my head. And, you decide to revisit that and revamp it or something. And I think that's valid, right? I mean, I don't think that forcing art is good for an artist's success.
Yeah, that's true. Also, very good advice, guys. Never delete anything. I mean, unless it's too big and it becomes like an ecological problem, but come on, I don't think it's the case. So you're right. Sometimes you look at something um, you've done like 2-3 years ago and you think, actually, that's how I should do it. And you do, sometimes it just takes one little change and then everything fits together. Um, but I do think that if you do not find a meaningful way to either use a technique or say something you wanted to say, then maybe it needs some more working. But by saying that, I'm gonna make myself some enemies, maybe from the trash art community, which I love. Right, it's not the point. I've collaborated with Robness, for example, but that's just my way of doing stuff.
I mean,
It's not. Yeah, sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
I don't want to cut you off. You continue. Sorry.
I just wanted to say it's not my place to say if anything's correct or not, and I mean, who gives a shit what I think, and who gives a shit what other things. If you want to do something, do it, right?
Yeah, personal philosophy. I mean, I think that's the big thing here. I I want to also talk a little bit like what made you decide to scrap old Nahiko and then continue on with Nahiko? Is that the timeline? Is that correct? And like what made or caused the shift?
About the wallet,
No,
I used to use.
yeah, I guess it is
So
technically
the
just the wallet.
profiles.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
profile wallet. Yeah, yeah.
So the profiles or on Rarible and OpenSea are associated with wallets. So that's why.
Mm.
So I changed wallet because something quite unfortunate happened to me, and this might be a very good lesson to everyone. In French, we say it's the chausseur mal chaussé. So for example, in my case, it's about hacking. Um, so I ended up getting my wallet phished during a hack. That was very funny. Um, And so I had to let go of that wallet. So technically, someone somewhere has the private key to that wallet, that old wallet. It seems they're not using it. They just grabbed the funds at some point. So that's why I'm still using it, and I'm just not minting there anymore. Um, so guys, use a hardware wallet, please. Um, as soon as you have the funds on there that, or if you have more than what a hardware wallet costs, then buy one. It's a very simple rule, right? If you have more than $100, probably it's probably even less, but
Mm,
buy one.
yeah.
Secure.
For so now I'm just curious. I'm pretty sure I already know the answer. The port into Rarible, does that also connect to your physical wallet, or is that only through like a MetaMask?
The new the new address I'm using, so the new profile.
Just in like just more generally speaking, I personally, I don't know if I should, whatever. I use an online wallet, and so I know that that's not like the most safe. I also have my funds in like a Trezor, but I'm just curious, like, does Rarible allow you to port in with only a physical wallet, or do you have to transfer to the physical wallet to move things off?
Yeah, I mean, Rarible itself doesn't care. They just want you. They just want to interact with MetaMask and I can't remember which other wallets. And you can use MetaMask as an interface between. So I'm using Ledger, for example, between Ledger and Rarible. And I think when you create a MetaMask account, they by default create your wallet. So you end up having an on-browser wallet, which isn't a bad thing because it's much simpler to sign transactions. Um, so do it by all means. Just don't keep all your funds there if you have a lot, just to be safe. And as everyone says, not your keys, not your wallet. Um, but yeah, I mean, MetaMask is awesome, and is it ties back to education, right? Um, so I think I know like a decent amount about the web and computers in general, but I was pretty new to the blockchain, right? So for example, for me, I didn't understand the implications of just using um, MetaMask versus having a hardware wallet, for example. So, guys, if you're listening to me and you don't know, um, get a hardware wallet if you care. If you don't, please don't. I mean, it's a pain. Maybe actually, I'm talking about something I don't know, right? Maybe, and for sure, there are hardware wallets where signing transactions is easier and maybe as easy as in MetaMask, but it's just the it gets back to UI and UX, which is very important. MetaMask did it very nicely. I think using it is so easy, right? You don't need to understand how the blockchain works or anything. You can just log in onto a website, and even from a developer standpoint, I've looked at it and creating a website that allows logging through MetaMask or any other digital wallet is pretty easy. So um, this props to the MetaMask team. Yeah.
Yeah. My friend actually used to work for them, and so yeah, I mean they put like a ton of time and effort into it. I I'm curious what your thought is. So this is like a discussion that I've kind of been having with some of my friends is like, one of the best ways to get people into NFTs is to and convert people in general is to decrease the friction, right? And friction is any barrier of entry, right? It could be knowledge or the how to or anything. And so I agree with you. MetaMask makes it extremely easy to not really fully understand the blockchain. I think that NFTs on certain sites, not to really go into detail, but certain sites do a really good job and some like are a little more crypto native, and so there's like variance. But I think that if you remove the friction, people can utilize it and adopt and then still push forward the technology. But you are obviously pretty good at learning into more of like the technical side of things. And do you think that there's a pro con aspect of removing any kind of friction in terms of user base, in terms of error, or just not everybody's going to do their own research, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where it comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree in the sense that also from a security standpoint, if you do not, for example, use MetaMask to log in onto a website, you can use very standard ways of logging in, right? Just what Facebook, Twitter, whatever company uses when you log in, right? Password, email. This works very good, and you're not reinventing the wheel, so you don't take any risks into programming stuff and adding errors into what you're programming. That's why there was a point where I was able to get into some super rare accounts. I don't know if you've seen this, but basically they were using their own way of logging in using MetaMask, which I think is more secure than the regular logging in using emails or whatever. Um, but because it basically has 2FA embedded in it, if you use, for example, a hardware wallet. But it also means that you're coding something that has not been coded yet. So you do take risks. Regarding friction for new users, I agree. I like what Flow has been doing. I mean, the platform and then the blockchain and Dapple apps. I like what Nifty has been doing. I just think we have to find some kind of sweet spot between all of those, right? It's just, we're going to get there. I mean, we're growing. And when I say we, it's just the crypto space is growing so fast. There are going to be shit's going to happen, right? That's okay. Um, it just we just need to try to have healthy discussions about finding new ways to do stuff, improve stuff. And up until now, this has been happening. I mean, when you look at it, even between platforms, everybody's trying to be productive. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it makes it makes sense to try to shoot everyone down and be the last one in the end. Everybody can help each other growing and finding new, better solutions.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where, I mean, you really can't stop progress regardless, right? Like the two of us, particularly, maybe you, but I'm not going to stop or start people really getting into NFTs or crypto or anything to that extent. And so I think
Mhm.
that, widespread adoption will, it's almost like having like a bunch of people test a game, right? Where like when you test a game, you figure out like different glitches and issues within the game. And so if you have one person doing it, they have to walk each centimeter of the map. But if you have thousands or millions, right, in terms of adoption, then you can kind of find those exploits and issues a lot faster. And so I
Yeah.
think that for the good of the whole and for the good, if we believe crypto is good, then this growth and obviously the bull market too will kind of like push all of that technology and security forward quicker.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So, for example, what I've been doing, it's not an excuse, right? But I think it ends up being positive for everyone, right? Because I'm not hurting anyone. The platform can fix bugs, and users are safe, right? So everyone's winning in the end. Um, and I do think that we might as well do it now that where the crypto space is still at a, and I'm not even sure it's still the case, but is still at a fair size that we can still communicate to each other without feeling like we have millions of people in between us. Because when it ends up being like that, you will not be able to control what we could call pen testers, right? You're going to have people trying to get into your platform who don't have any interest in crypto or in crypto art, who just want to make some money or something. So that's where it ends up being more important. So, but I think I'm 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 actually fine with how things are going until now. I think pretty much every platform I can think of that is established um, is safe. I mean, it's fairly safe. Nothing is 100% safe, but it's fairly safe. Um, and I do think there's, because of the innovation, you have like, we can look at Twitter, but like every day you're going to have a new platform uh, being created, right? So that's where you, as a user, have to uh, know what you're getting into, right? What's the company? Did they program this in 30 days, or do they know the crypto space, et cetera, et cetera? And always, I think it actually, all of this probably doesn't matter if you as a user know what you're doing, right? That at the end of the day, if you use a hardware wallet, you have your seed phrase backed up. You have maybe multiple wallets just to be safe. I mean, there's nothing can really happen. You just check every transaction you sign if there's a high value or high transaction fee, and you should be pretty much good. The onus is on the platforms right now. Every smart contract being coded is another um, huge lump of code that has not been tested enough. Or, I mean, that's not entirely true, but it could be. It hasn't been tested as much as some other platforms like Facebook or something, right? Because if you look at the number of Solidity programmers, I don't have the numbers, right, but it's ridiculous compared to JavaScript programmers, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and probably every platform that is trying to build something on Ethereum right now, the biggest struggle is probably getting people who know what the fuck they're doing. So that's going to be a big challenge, but it's going to change. I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure there are schools who already have implemented Solidity into their courses. And if not, then what the fuck are they doing?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I guess I'm curious, like with your background and your interest in the space, like do you try and fulfill bounties? Do you think that you'll try and go into some kind of Ethereum cybersecurity almost, or are you kind of just like happy in your job and this is just more of like a hobby, or what's the thought?
Yeah, me personally, I'm just doing this as a like on the side of my job. I'm happy with my job. I would probably, or I will probably end up doing art full time. But I mean, I'm the kind of guy who likes everything. I just like to learn, right? I could probably spend my days. I don't know what sounds boring. Playing cards, even that's not boring. Nothing's boring. I mean, as long as you learn, it can be interesting. So no, I'm happy with what I'm doing. Um, but obviously, pen testing is a job. A lot of people learned it through tutorials on the internet, hacking, or just by doing. Um, and I don't think I have the level to be one, just because the exploits, I don't know enough exploits, I think. But it just so happens that I like coding. I like creating websites, back end, front end, and I like what I code to be secure. So whenever I see something that isn't, it just bugs me. and so I try to find a cool way to show it. But yeah, I've had a platform wanting to reward me with ETH. I said no because I felt bad accepting money for hacking them.
Mm,
But yeah, that's what bounty hunters do. There's actually a token created by a guy. So the token has the same name as the guy, who's called Ziot, Ziot, I think, who's a pretty good hacker. And he actually had the idea of creating a token which is going to be used by hackers for bounties. So like, I don't know the technical details, but it's basically when you hack, like when you find an exploit, you create a token, I guess, which you then transfer to the company for the money. Like they pay you, you give them the token, and inside the token, I guess, is the exploit and how to fix it. I'm not sure about the details, right? But that I think it's a good. That's one of the use cases, for example, for the blockchain or Ethereum, which make a lot of sense, I think.
yeah. I mean, that's, it's awesome. And I mean, safety and getting paid to create more safer spaces definitely, makes sense. I think so. We just flew through an hour. I like to close out with like two questions. I really appreciate the level of technicality that you have, because for me, you dumb it down enough that I can understand, like 90%, like 90%. Or you don't know what you don't know, so I'm gonna say 90%. It might be a lot more, but I'm curious, like for you coming onto the show, if you're in my shoes, like what would be some questions that you would have asked yourself?
Uh, gee, um, I'm not sure. Jesus, I'm not sure. Just maybe it's not a question, but an answer that regarding what you just said about knowledge and so I've had a tweet. I don't know if you saw it about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you know it?
Mm,
Um,
I've heard it, but I don't have it top of mind right now.
it's basically a chart where you have a curve that evolves through not time but knowledge, and it shows that. So that's based on actual data. Um, it shows that the more knowledge you get, you go through different phases. Right? When you start learning about a subject, you go from being having zero confidence on knowing anything to in a very short amount of time thinking you actually know everything, right? And then the more you learn, the more you realize, shit, I've actually got a lot more to learn, right? Everybody has experienced this, I think. And so you have this curve where it actually goes down, your confidence goes down. You actually realize, shit, I don't know anything. And then it goes back at some point. It actually, a more simple way of saying it, even though it's cryptic, from Bruce Lee, I think it was, which I like, is saying a punch is just a punch. Then he says a punch is more than a punch. And then he goes back to a punch is just a punch. There's bits like that, right? When he starts, yeah, it's just a punch. And then he realizes, oh shit, there's a lot more to it. Um, so I think right now, for me, for example, I'm not at the end of the curve. I still have a lot to learn in the crypto space, and I do think it's interesting to keep that curve and that effect in mind when you talk to someone. Try to realize what your level of knowledge is. Try to not overestimate it. Is the most important. If you underestimate it, it's okay, but try to always um, underestimate it if possible,
Yeah,
not the other way.
I think that's good. I mean, I think it's something where, I joke around a lot, and I call myself a moron, and I try and keep that kind of mindset. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's difficult because you get to like a point and you're like, I got this, and that's obviously problematic. But if you always come in from a standpoint of like trying to learn, that's always good. And
Yeah.
then I do like Bruce Lee quotes. When you're saying that, I also think about Mike Tyson quotes, which is, everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. And I almost imagine that effect of like somebody like I used to do Muay Thai, which I've brought up on a couple occasions, and I've like boxed a little bit too. And
Mhm.
you box, you do shadow boxing, you like learn how to throw the punches, and you're like, yeah, I could like really like I could beat somebody up now. And then you like spar against somebody, and you just get demolished. Like you just can't touch them, or just getting kicked in the head, and
Yeah.
I've stopped that at this point in my life for like a good long while. But like you go through like that effect of like, okay, like I'm really good, like I could definitely take people, and then you just get beat up a lot. And like once that happens, yes, hitting air, exactly. Cybercode twins put hitting air. Yeah, that's never like a good thing. You put everything into a punch. You're like, all right, I'm gonna like knock the smirk off his face, and they're just not there anymore. And yeah, so I think it's definitely
Nothing
relevant.
beats experience. Yeah,
Exactly,
nothing beats
exactly. I like to close out with another fun question, which is, what do you think your purpose is in life?
Oh, Jesus, those questions. What is your answer? Maybe that helps me.
I have not answered this at all. I like to. It's actually I've had the thought process because like I've wondered if people will ask me back, and you're the
Mhm.
first person to do so. And
Sorry.
no, it's cool. It's cool. I think that my purpose is to just continuously learn. I and I like to share too, but I really enjoy the process of getting better at things. I like the entirety of it. I like the passion that I have for things, and then I like the anger and upsetness that I get when I'm not getting good enough fast enough, and I can see the differences, right? That I
Yeah.
have versus other people that are really good at things. And
Mhm.
I really enjoy that chase and then sharing and helping other people. And so right now I'm learning how to better talk, and I'm trying to help other people do so too, and then put it out in front of people and then like utilize it for good. In terms of, helping somebody who eventually, hopefully, to give like a platform to somebody to really get their idea or artwork or whatever out to like our larger group of people. And so I think that's my purpose. I think.
That, yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have thought about it as a purpose, but if that's your way of thinking about it, I'd say mine is might be the same, right? Like my aim is just not doing something that bores me without, so that's like my first function as a human, I would say, using like referencing to AI. That's my objective function, and my restriction is doing so by hurting the less people possible, or the less things possible, let's say. Okay. um, so yeah, I agree. Learning, it's just so, dude, it's just so funny. You start at a point where you don't know shit, and at the end you feel like, and I say you feel because that's important, you feel like you have mastered the thing, right? It's just a feeling, but it feels so good. It feels so good to be able to think about something and know that you can execute it. It's just a tool, but it's important to have tools, because without tools you're not able to create. So yeah, maybe the end function is creating stuff, but it goes through learning. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, brothers in learning.
Let's start a cult.
I don't. I'm ending on that note. Running from cults. Maybe a group. Maybe a support group. um, yeah. I mean, let's wrap it there. You know, Nahiko, thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. 2 out of 3 done for the day, and dude, I really appreciate the time. This was awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me, and you're an awesome person. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Same to you, man. Have a good one. Peace.
See ya.